dead period is coming into effect here, but it comes on the heels of a huge month of June for Michigan football recruiting, which now stands 14th in the country in the 2025 rankings. They have 12 commits, 8 4-stars, 4 3-stars. That blue chip ratio of 67% is higher than last year's 2024 class when Michigan had 14 of its 26 members as 4-star or higher. They're trending for more targets as well. Our EJ Holland over at the Wolverine.com and Steve Wiltfong of On3 have placed some expert predictions as well. Two that stand out to me are for a couple Andrews, top 100 wide receiver Andrew Marsh, 4-star tight end Andrew Olish. They haven't finished a deal yet, but Michigan in a good spot. For those guys, they landed about 5 or 6 commits just last month alone, trending for 5 or 6 more, including the 2 Andrews. But before we get into it, I know we talked a little bit the other day about our favorite recruits that Michigan's landed. We'll get into a couple more maybe of those individuals. But, Anthony, I'll ask you this, and I'll give my take as well. What has allowed for this momentum for Michigan this month?
Yeah, I mean, I think you start with EJ's intel, which is that on these visits, it seems like Sean McGee has been more involved in them, which I think him being sort of the general manager and the liaison between the football program and NIL and things like that, I think you're able to sell kind of a more cohesive vision on what things might look like. I think that helps. I also think that, this is something we've talked about several times over the last several months, is that when you look at a staff that is basically sort of starting over from scratch in a lot of ways with making contacts and making inroads with 25s. I mean, right now, this time of year is where you're kind of really establishing a lot of relationships with, the 26 guys. But this staff right now is doing both of those things. So I think that's part of it. I think being able to get guys on campus is certainly helpful as well. And I do think the NIL thing is starting to come around. I really do. And I know people get upset with soon, but I really do think that when you talk to some of the people involved in that in Ann Arbor, when you talk to some of the people involved with the collectives, people involved with the program, it just seems like we're finally in a spot where they're building towards something and there is a cohesive vision and a cohesive plan. And listen, I know things are going to change with revenue sharing and all of those types of things, but when you look at the class as a whole, at least where they stand right now, I've never been a guy that, Michigan's an elite program. There's no reason they shouldn't pull 5 stars, just like, Ohio State and these other. That doesn't bother me. I think when you look at the composite and when you look at, what does the total haul of players look like? I think that conversation to me is how many top 100 guys are you bringing in? And you've got a couple at the top of this class already in Nate Marshall and Kenoa Winston, the safety. Who knows? Carter Smith could be a top 100 guy if he has a big senior season. Right now, he's just outside the top 200. But with Olesh, with Marsh, when you start bringing in top 100 talent, and if you can find a way to maximize that with the way that they've been able to develop guys that have been a bit under-recruited or undervalued, I think that's because I think by losing Jim Harbaugh, you lose some on the margins in terms of player development. It is important to bring in more top 100 guys. And the fact that we're seeing momentum in those type of recruitments, and not just momentum, guys that are like, I think the last few years when you get a top 100 commit, people are like, yeah, but is Miami going to swoop in with NIL? Is Kentucky going to swoop in with NIL? It seems like the guys they have right now and the guys that are in on are pretty firmly interested. So I think I really just think it's the pressure coming off of everyone of the transition and NIL being where it needs to be and just kind of letting the staff go to work. I think it's a combination of all those things.
Yeah, and on the NIL pay for play front, like you don't want pay for play to be a reason why somebody who does fit your culture goes somewhere else. And I think that maybe, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that maybe was happening early on in this cycle and could be a reason why Michigan got off to a slow start. But there are two sides of NIL, right? It's one, getting the support that includes from your athletic department and making sure you have the full contacts of donors and and that you have development on your side and that sort of thing, as well as the actual donations, which are very important when we talk about this. And then the other side of it is the approach that Michigan takes. What is the communication like with the recruits? And you mentioned it with Sean McGee, Michigan's general manager. It seems like ever since he's gotten more involved a few weeks ago, starting with June official visits, Michigan has been able to satisfy what a lot of these recruits are looking for in terms of communication. And hey, here's what you can make here. These are the types of packages that our current players have. I mean, a lot of the current players, most of the scholarship guys on this roster, and even the walk-ons now, have signed contracts with Michigan's collective champion circle. So it's not like they're not engaging in this. They needed to get their point across. It seems like it is happening. It's funny, you and I were asked, a few weeks ago on our mailbag show about what's the reason for Michigan's slow start on the recruiting trail. Is it the new coaching staff? Is it NIL? We both said, of course, it was a combination. And I think that as Sherrone Moore has gotten his recruiting staff in place, the coaches have been here a little bit longer, had more time to develop relationships. Lamar Morgan and all these guys. I don't know why I just mentioned him, but they all were on the road during the spring evaluation period, getting to know different coaches, getting to know these players at their schools, actually working them out as well, evaluating them. So all that sometimes just takes time. So I think it's two things converging at once of the pay for play and Michigan's coaching staff kind of getting its, footing a little bit here, with having a bunch of new parts and a different operation. Sherrone Moore brought in about a dozen recruiting analysts as well that are going to assist each assistant coach as they go along. So it's a new operation, and it maybe just took a little bit of time.
And I think an important thing to sort out too is that not all recruitments that come down to NIL are just, oh, well, this kid wants NIL, so they're not a fit for us. Like, there are a lot of guys that are probably darn good fits for Michigan that they have been missing on, like you said, because NIL is a data point now. The plan that you have, and maybe it's not even, maybe it wasn't even that the money's not there up front. Maybe it's that there wasn't a stated plan, or that there wasn't, a cohesive vision that, now you have, several different aspects of the recruitment now where you've got players and their NIL agents, you've got the actual programs themselves, and you've got the collectives, that everything has to kind of work in unison. So I think that that's probably a big part of it too. Listen, I mean, again, every individual decision that comes down is on a case-by-case basis. But when you see trends where you're losing NIL recruitments to the University of Kentucky, or you're losing it to, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but they lost someone to Illinois last cycle that I think was a 4-star recruit. When you start losing those type of recruitments, I think that's eye-opening. So don't let it be, you want to have this pitch that is well-rounded to all these guys, and don't let something that really, quite frankly, is kind of controllable when it comes to operationally what NIL should look like. Don't let that be something that holds you back. And I think that we've seen a big improvement on that front in the last several months.
It's worth noting that it's not just the staff that is new either. Just only back in March, was the federal court injunction went through where now you can actually talk to these kids. And I know it was happening well before this at other schools, but, a lot of the Big Ten schools, the way Michigan operates, but now you can talk to them and guarantee them and, basically offer them money from your collective. And that's only been a few months in. So, Michigan wasn't really that slow to adapt to it. I just think a lot of other schools were quicker to adapt to it than they were allowed to, even though they haven't been caught and won't get caught. But let's talk about some of the recruits that excite us. Brady Hart, 2026 quarterback, I think is clearly one of them. So maybe we take him off the board. But before we name ours, I want to implore people watching on YouTube, leave a comment right now of your favorite recruit Michigan has landed recently. It could be Brady Hart for you. Tell us why as well. We'll be engaging in the comments, replying to all of them. So make sure to drop your comment in there if you're watching on YouTube. But AB, you want to give your guy, or you want me to name somebody?
So in this class or recently, or what's the criteria here?
Either way.
Yeah, I mean, Brady Hart would lead that list, right? For all the reasons that we talked about the other day, the fact that he is every Michigan fan's password to all of their accounts, which I hope you guys have changed that since last we've spoke. Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit recently too. I mean, the fact that you've got someone entering their junior season that's already 6'5", 185. They have the frame to add more. They have the prototypical size. I mean, that's anytime you land a guy, especially at the quarterback position, where there's upward trajectory in what his skill set could be. Carter Smith, to a certain extent, falls in that category as well. Now that he's focusing more on football as opposed to being a dual sport guy with baseball thrown in. I mean, that's exciting too. I think athleticism at the quarterback position is more important now than it's ever been. Think about that play in the Rose Bowl, the trick play that kind of was botched. And if JJ McCarthy was a lesser athlete, what was the old quote? A
lesser athlete would have gone down. Yeah,
that's right. So, I mean, I think that given that everyone is just so freaky athletic on the field now, especially edge rushers, especially linebackers, your quarterback's got to have a little juice to his game there too. So I like that they've kind of prioritized that on the recruiting trail over the last few years. In terms of other guys in this class, Donovan Johnson to me is interesting because he was a guy that was not too long ago a 5-star recruit. And if I'm not mistaken, it was an ACL that he dealt with last year that he's coming back from.
I believe so.
I mean, I don't know. Someone smarter than me can fill us in on how torn ACLs in high school tend to affect careers. I know when those guys get to college, certainly when those guys get to the NFL, it's basically, I mean, it's a long road to recovery and you have to work extremely hard. And maybe that's where some of the intangible things about a player come into the mix here. But I don't know how much more different it is to come back from a torn ACL in high school, especially since you're talking about guys that are still developing physically and things like that too. But, if he hits, I mean, it's another, it's just another player in the line of guys that are going to keep this running back room as one of the better units in college football. I think they have that this year with the guys at the top of the depth chart. Certainly, we both think very highly of Jordan Marshall. I think he's a future star. To kind of just keep passing the baton to someone else, I think is that's what the great programs do. That's what the programs with staying power do. And when you look at what Michigan's done at running back over the last 3 or 4 years, and we'll see if it changes under Tony Alford, because it's, he's going to recruit a little bit better than Mike Hart, but is he going to develop as well? That's a big question too. But, the fact that all high school prospects are lotto tickets, whether they're a 5-star, a 3-star, 2-star, I'm willing to bet on the guy with 5-star traits coming out of high school, getting him in your program, letting him heal up, and, coming into a situation where you are deep at the position is, I think that's a really good situation for him to be in.
Yeah, and he's cleared and ready to play his senior season. So we're going to get to see exactly this fall, like what he has as a healthy back again. I guess his sophomore highlights were pretty incredible. But to your point, what if Michigan becomes, how Wisconsin, maybe 5-10 years ago just had that line of backs like John Clay to, it was like James White, then Monty Ball, or vice versa. I think it might have been the other way around. And it kept going on and on. Jonathan Taylor, then it's like you see the flashes, from Jonathan Taylor as a freshman, and then the next year he's the guy. And, then when he's a junior, there's another guy that's a freshman you can see that is going to be the next guy. Like Michigan could kind of start becoming that when you think about Hassan Haskins handing the baton, as you put it, to Blake Corum, to now Donovan Edwards, Kalel Mullings. We'll see what happens this fall with the backfield split, but Jordan Marshall right behind him, and Ben Hall and other guys that could be in the mix as well. I think that's a fascinating thing. And the way Michigan plays, you would think they'd be able to get some top backs in the fold as well. And it seems like Donovan Johnson's one of those guys. I got a couple that I'll name and keep getting them in the comments if you're listening or watching. Appreciate you doing that. Kenoa Winston, you mentioned him earlier, Anthony, but the nickel commit out of Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C., number 95 player in the country. I was watching his highlights earlier, and I love this about his junior highlight tape, and people should go watch it because he has great speed. Our E.J. Holland has compared him to Bob Sanders, who is multiple time All-Pro safety for the Colts. But
that's a throwback name. That's a football guy name.
That is a football guy name, and one of the best football players in his era, frankly, on the defensive side of the ball. And, so will Winston turn out that good? We'll see. I don't think EJ's, giving the comparison there of that's the type of career he's going to have, but that's the style of player he is. He's got great football speed, gets to the football. But if you watch his junior highlight tape, the first play is a pick six, second play is a punt block, third play is a punt block, fourth play is a field goal block, and the fifth play is a field goal block. So you have out of the first 5 plays, 4 on special teams. And Tony Alford was talking on a podcast this week about how he loves when he sees a recruit that not only plays special teams, but embraces special teams and puts it on his highlight film. And then I'm watching Winston's highlights, and there it is, 4 of the first 5 plays. So I liked to see that, but the speed really stands out. Excited to see how he does his senior season. And then I have to shout out, I had this, really became a huge fan of Deacon Tony Ellie this spring, after the spring game it was. And then you start reading into him, you start thinking about what he could do for this offense as an emerging force. Eli Owens is a 3-star tight end commit Michigan has, but this dude can hit. His highlight films, a lot of it is blocking, and he's the next Max Bredesen. He's wearing number 44. He is doing the dirty work. He can also catch. He can also run. But I really like Eli Owens, and that is a really valuable position for Michigan recently. People don't talk enough about Max Bredesen, but he's kind of a secret weapon on this offense as well. And that's, when he moves on, that's going to be somebody that's hard to replace. But Eli Owens is going to be there. We'll see if Max uses another year next season, but I think that's a really valuable position. So wanted to shout him out as well. But anything else before we move? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I love guys like that. I mean, I think give a rival school their flowers on here. Like players like Connor Hayward or, for Michigan State, players like a Max Bredesen. Those just those are football players, man. I mean,
in quotations. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, those guys, those are mentality setting type of players. And it's good to see that Michigan is still kind of recruiting that too. I mean, I think, when you look at what the line of succession in that Max Bredesen role is, I mean, it's probably Eli Owens, 2 years down the road, right? Like we'll see what happens there, but shout out Jalen Hoffman as well. Someone that they think can be that next in line, a walk-on currently at Michigan. But yeah, I like this class. I mean, again, it's so far so good. A lot of work to still do. You assume they'll be somewhere in the 20s with all of it. And like I said, EJ and Zach do a great job breaking all that down and reporting on that for us. But yeah, I mean, it's you want to be. It's good to see them recruiting this way. Just because you recruit better doesn't necessarily mean you will replicate the success of the last few years. Again, I think that already when you look back and at some of the guys that aren't there anymore, both on the coaching staff, on the roster, you kind of realize this last 3 years was a pretty special, maybe era defining group for Michigan football. But you got to have good players to win a lot of football games. And even when you look at this list at guys that are maybe the low 4 stars or the 3 stars, there are things to like about them there. So get them in, develop them, and let them compete and find out what their roles are. But yeah, it's a good batch of lotto tickets to have.
And if they finish and close with a lot of guys they're trending for, coupled with the guys they already have in the fold, it could end up similar to some of those classes that did help build Michigan's dominance over the last few years.